Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to this week's recording of Relentless Podcast. I have a guest today. My friend William is joining me, and we've wanted to do this for a while now, but we're going to get to talk a lot about our shared history and specifically about our parents, because William's dad was a very influential, instrumental person in his life and family. So was my dad, and I wanted William to join me to just kind of relive some of our fondest memories of these men that we hold in such high esteem. And we'll get to talk more about that. William, how's it going?
Hey, good. Always a pleasure to connect with you.
So good to see you, man.
Yeah, thanks for the power of technology. I mean, you're over there in Japan, I'm here in Ireland, but it's all good.
I'm happy we can finally get to do this.
Exactly. It's been a long time coming.
Yes. How's your family?
Family's good. Family's good. We're keeping well. We just came out of a terrible storm there.
I saw that.
So God is good. We came out unscathed. So
yes,
yeah, we're doing good.
That's
good. Hope you guys are.
We're doing great. It's been warm. It's supposed to be winter, but it's rather warm, so it's ideal. We just had a few family visits recently, but finally back to normal life. It's good. Good things. How's Jaden? Is Jaden still winning tournaments?
Well, the weather's been pretty crap the last.
Right. No golf for you guys.
No, like most of the clubs are closed at this stage, because we've got frost on the ground and the weather's just been So it's we've done a few rain sessions, but nothing major.
Yeah.
And FYI, I mean, he's now my height, so it's probably taller than you.
This is what I just saw this kid 6 months ago. Wow.
Can you imagine? Yeah, he's probably growing a few inches, so I'm not sure whether he's literally my height or slightly taller than me.
Good
my shoes are in trouble. Yeah, my shoes are in trouble because he keeps nicking them now.
I thought you had a special family, man. I enjoyed spending time with your son, yourself, and it's so good to see. It was so good to see. Very, very, very impressed with your son. Everybody in my team enjoyed, especially just his humility and his very mature questions. Mr. Rogers was especially impressed, so they ask about him often. So hopefully we do it again. We'll see. I think the next one might actually be in America. So we'll make sure to get you guys an invite.
Well, definitely. I mean, we'll gladly be there. It's just a stone throw away across the pond. So we'd love to be there.
Yeah. William, I wanted us to talk especially because your dad, obviously, very renowned in Zambia, was an international soccer player, broke so many barriers, very renowned in Zambia. Everybody knows him, but it's his ability and what he was able to do for you as a son and your family. I know he was very impactful to your family in the town of Chingola. So, and we shared that history because my dad was very influential and I learned so much from him. And I think that we shared that, but also just, our friendship. So I wanted to go right to that point. And my first question for you is going to be, tell me your fondest memory of your dad.
It's like my dad. It's the interesting thing about my dad is, I lived a life with my dad in, I can say almost like 2 seasons, if I can call it that. It was my dad, the soccer player, famous, well known throughout Zambia and everything. And this is the father I kind of knew up until I was maybe around 15, 16 years old. And then there was the father I knew then post the accident, because he was involved in a car accident that left him paraplegic.
Yeah.
He was in a wheelchair for 18 years. So then there was a side of my dad, and then I got to know again for the 18 years he was in a wheelchair. So there was 2 chapters in my dad's life that I really got to know. So I have, when it comes to fond memories, there's memories when I was young, and then there's memories when my dad was in the wheelchair there that, will always kind of stay with me. But it's funny, one of my earliest childhood memories, which just kind of stayed with me, was that, like I remember him taking us to the swimming pool.
Yeah.
So to the swimming pool, and I remember it was a public swimming pool, but it was closed off. And it was in the morning. It wasn't officially open to the public.
Yeah.
But because of my dad he knew the guy who ran the swimming. Exactly. So then, I mean, like when you look at it, was an Olympic-sized swimming pool. It was a really, really big place, and it was just my dad, my brother, and Michelle. It was just like the 4 of us. Yeah. That memory kind of really still resonates with me. My dad loved to swim. So that is one of many, but I don't know. That's just one of the memories that just keeps coming back. I really enjoyed that day because it felt so special.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So
there's been there's very few people that have been able to get that level of impact in communities. And I remember my very first time going to Chingola was as a junior golfer going to play golf, and there was always something about Chingola and their connection to soccer. And anytime you thought of Chingola, Nchanga Rangers, and soccer, it was Willie that came up. And
Yes.
there's been very few people that have been able to create that level of impact and create that hype around their name. And your dad sounds like he did it very seamlessly. He carried himself so well, built a name which became a brand, and his reputation extends well beyond his lifetime. So, but it's saying when you say something like that, it's also there's another side to it, which was that you probably shared your dad with so many people. Your dad was a people person. It's kind of like it was a state property, and everybody kind of had a portion of your dad. What was that like? Your dad being the big soccer star in the town, everybody knows Willie Phiri. What was that like for you?
It was very surreal, especially when you're young. You don't really understand the gravitas of the situation, right? Because for me, especially when I was much younger, my dad went to work and he comes back. He's going to work, he comes back home, but you don't really, So he's my dad.
Yeah.
But you all understand, you get a sense of the awareness that this man, because my dad, he was soft-spoken. My dad never laid a finger on me, It was mom is the one who was the disciplinarian. She was the one who used to give the ass whooping, Dad always, but the threat of mom saying, oh, your dad is going on was always. But he was very, very calm and whatever. But there was, you got the sense that there's more to this man than this calm demeanor when you go out. Like there was one time, we went with mom and dad. We went to the market. From the market that time, my dad, I think, was driving like a Peugeot 504 or something. Like the car literally got mobbed. What's going on here?
And this was like in the early 90s, right?
No, this is like in the 80s now. I'm a 70s kid, Generation X, It's like in the 80s, So like what's with all this hype? This is just bad.
Right.
Then you start to get an appreciation of this man is, there's something about it.
There's more to him, right?
And the other thing as well that also brought it home, I think I've mentioned this to you before, like, in passing or, in some of our previous conversations. I remember my first memory of watching my dad play football, right? Went to the stadium and my mom took me to the stadium. We went there. And this was because by the time I could have those early memories, my dad was towards the end of his career playing soccer. So so anytime he got onto the ball, and this is time like Zambians are crazy about football. Anytime he's on the crowd just going wild. Everybody was like, really? And for me, that infuriated me because for me, this is my dad. You be Zambian, you appreciate that, like you do not call somebody who's older than you by their
first name, right?
So I can't call you Vincent. I have to call you by Vincent. So for me, what really ticked me off was the fact that they were calling my father Willie.
Disrespectful.
I was a kid, and for me, that was the only gripe I had. But then you begin to realize that, okay, no, this man there's more to this man, So
magnitude.
And then as the older you grow, and then the interactions I was getting with him, and this is probably something you experienced as well with your own father. Anytime as the older I grew and the experiences I had with my father interacting with other people, and the way he responded to them, then you begin to realize just how much of a huge figure he was, and how much he had to say in different situations, and how much respect he enthused on different people. My father had a way of cultivating time for people. And I think that's what people appreciated him. Some of the strikers we've had that have come from Changa Rangers, people like Stone Yarenda, who ended up prying his trade in Belgium. Another great striker, Axon Shimbala. He was the first Zambian player to ever be on the cover of Kickoff magazines. Such guys, these were diamonds in the rough. They came from places like Stone Yarenda, I think, came from Chambesh. Like there was nothing there, and then he came, and then my dad saw something in him and cultivated something from no, and he became one of the best strikers in the country. But it's personal interactions he had with people, he knew how to get the best out of people.
Right.
And I think we really try to emulate that from him throughout the years. Just having that sense of patience, just having that ability to give somebody enough space for them to open up to you so that you can have a conversation like what we're having, real conversation.
He made people feel special, and I can relate to that because my dad was similar. My dad didn't have as big a name as your dad, but he was definitely a people person, and everybody knew him within our small town in Wansha. And what was especially special about him was his ability to connect with people from the lowest ranking to the highest, especially around the golf club circles. The level of affluence that you see sometimes and the social divides are very marginal. But sometimes to see my dad interact with senior managers of the copper mines and senior people, and then also interact with the caddies, I took that to heart. And I think I learned a lot by just observing him interact with people. And I would like to think that some of those social skills have really helped me as I've grown older and in my own relationship journey. There was something special, and I don't think that it was taking as much out of them. They were just being who they were,
Exactly.
Right.
And I think, not too short, but I think you're being a bit modest there about your father, Vincent, because your father is legendary in Rome at the golf club.
Right.
Because,
yeah.
And you can only appreciate it especially as a golfer. You go to Rome, your father is so highly spoken of. And, and in such good, and it speaks volumes of the kind of person you've turned out to be. Clearly, the way your father did a great job,
Right. I was at a conference recently, and one of the things that, especially with my story and when I've traveled and done public speaking, there's always been that lingering question is like, what's the end to my story, right? It's like, okay, what's this guy becomes a PGA golf professional, but what is it about the story that makes it special? What is the selling points to the story? And not long ago, I found and figured that out. I think that what was special about, if anything was special about my story is that I was able to build a relationship with my dad. Especially in our social circles, our relationships are not that intimate within the family circles, especially with parents. But I think I was able to break that barrier with my dad, especially from spending so much time with him at the golf club, that more than him being my dad, I'm one of age, number 7, but we had such a friendship that was beyond a father-son. My dad was my friend. And that's why, way up now, running up to his death, especially in his older age, it was just so special that any news that I had, anything that I had to talk about anything, the first person I would call was my dad. And I think it takes a lot to be able to build that relationship. And I'm learning that from my own son. Because, what's funny is that, as I say about my dad, that relationship, my brothers don't share the same, comments about their relationship with my dad. And I think it's very humbling to me now to see the impact that I didn't even realize was in the making when all of those events were happening. It's only now that I can see it in reflection and in talking to people. I see a lot of my dad in me, even as I communicate with people. And it was very special. And that's the other thing about your dad too. I mean, when you go to Chingola, for instance, what was so special in speaking with you and knowing your family is the dynamics of how your mom and dad were very special in their relationship, but also in their way of kind of raising you guys up. You guys have turned out to be good citizens of society and done phenomenal things and continuing on. But tell me about your family dynamics, especially your mom and your dad's relationship before the accident. But I'm sure it was even so much more strengthened after that, because now your dad being the superstar he was, unfortunately, the last half of his life, kind of your mom was basically the primary caregiver for your dad. What was that dynamic like for their relationship?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, it was this is something you probably wouldn't wish on anybody, but the lessons learned, unfortunately, life's lessons can only be learned at the end. You're just like your degree, you only get it at the end. You won't get it up front, So you only realize just how much you've learned kind of like after the fact. So like that relationship, initially, like you don't know what you're going to get down the road.
Right.
So you don't fully appreciate it sometimes. So like our relationship, like, my mom and dad, they had a great relationship. And I think most likely because my dad traveled the world a lot.
That's a good point. He was very well exposed.
He was very well exposed. So I mean, my father used to have date nights.
Right. When you told me that, first of all, that was very special. I never, like I say as much as I say about my dad, but I don't remember us going to a restaurant once, you know?
No, exactly. So they used to have date nights and pretty frequently. So I think he puts me to shame as well, because I feel like I should up my game some more. They used to have date nights, you take mom out like on a regular basis, maybe once a month or something. So that was a regular occurrence. Never used to see them argue.
Right.
Not they never had their differences. If they did, obviously they were behind closed doors, but we never saw them argue. It was a pretty picture, you know, growing up. So it was nice. It was never an antagonistic situation. So we grew up in a very calm and very well-seasoned environment where everything was nice. And this was like my father got in an accident in his 30s, right?
Was it that? Okay, yeah. Yes.
He was 38 years old, and he was getting very, very successful. Just before the accident, he had actually been given a role at the South Africa Sports Academy. And the year leading to that, he had been very successful. He actually even told my mom that, look, you don't have to work. I have it covered, you know.
Right.
And my mom had been working from the time she was like 20 years old. So she just didn't want to sit around and do nothing, you know. So she took up a job. She was working like twice a week or something just to keep herself busy, you know. So she was kind of like, my mom was kind of like semi-retired. Dad was handling the situation. You know, 1992, getting into 1993, like he was supposed to start that job in South Africa in February. And that January, he had the accident.
Yeah.
You know, so he had the accident, and so it was you know,
that changed you guys.
Changed the whole dynamic. We were obviously in denial when the initial reports were like, oh, he'll never walk again. And this is a man he's a sportsman. He spent most of his time outdoors, coaching, being physically fit, and then you tell him that he's never going to walk again. So obviously we were all in denial that no, this can't be the the end all. So anyway, and that was the beginning of the second chapter.
Right.
Because
so let's just, before you get to that, William. So I want to bring it back here because your dad was a young protege, really. So how old was he when he played for Zambia? I think he was a teenager.
Yes. So my dad actually, when he was spotted, he had his soccer career almost never started. You know, my grandfather, my late grandfather, he was a policeman, and at the time, like in sports, there's no money in sports, and my grandfather loathed the idea that my father would actually be playing football.
Yeah.
You know. So, but my grandfather's best friend encouraged my father to play, and he kind of vouched for my dad that no.
There's something special about him.
No, let him play, let him cook. So, and that's how, my grandfather's best friend, kind of vouched for my dad. And that's how my dad started playing football. So I started playing primary school, secondary school. There's a man called Ante Boselic. I think he was
Yugoslav. He was a coach, right, at the time.
He was a coach. So he kind of, there's something special about this boy. So he kind of took him on, and, so like he was the coach from Changa Rangers or something like that. And then
how old was your dad at this point?
Oh, he must have been like maybe 14, 15, around Jaden's age.
Right. So I think that's what I read. I read something about that. Yeah.
He was very young. By the time he was 16, turning 17, he was already playing for Changa Rangers, and he made his international debut.
Right.
And he was going to secondary school, and he made his international debut. Then they started calling him the schoolboy international.
And that was, first of all, and I think just for the record, we have to emphasize how special this was, because especially back in the day, even I went to school with 25-year-olds. So your dad's 17 and being in the national team was almost unheard, because he was young, and to break barriers and the bureaucracy, making it into the national, that was amazing.
Yes. So it was definitely very unique, and it was very surreal for him as well, because I mean, he's the teenage kid, and then you're playing for the national team, and you're going to school on top of that. Right. And then you have a father who's a policeman who's still very strict, who still holds you accountable.
Yeah.
So that's how really, and but as soon as his international and soccer career started, he had to mature very, very quickly. And, at the time then, as soon as he left school, he got married. He got married pretty young. He got married when I think it was like 22, 23.
You guys were born in stardom, right?
We definitely were not made to feel like it.
Right. That's good.
Yeah, so which is good, and probably because at the time we were being raised, there was no money. The fame was there, but the
Right,
money didn't fall. The
right.
money didn't fall,
But
and
he was industrious too, because I think he had connections like with, obviously in Changa Rangers and with the KC and the
yes,
mines at the time. But I think it was
yes,
just so now then your dad from that time builds his career, becomes the biggest soccer player in the country, travels the world representing Zambia, captain of the Zambia national soccer team. And
yes,
then towards his retirement, he retires obviously as a phenomenal impactor in Changa Rangers. And now
yes,
he's earmarked to take on another international role with the South African
yes,
Academy, Soccer Academy, which is another big
yeah,
milestone because at the time, Zambia was not exporting players or coaches at the time. And then the
yeah.
accident happens.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we had all our lives planned out, because we were literally about to move, and he had the option of actually going earlier. But
Mhm.
the thing is, he decided to postpone, moving earlier because he was coming up for gratuity, in Zambia. So I was like, look, I only have if I leave at the end, if I work through January, I get my gratuity.
Right,
Not knowing that was the gift and the curse,
right,
you know.
right,
So like, and mom was like, "You just leave," but he
right,
was like, "No, I've only got a couple of months before I get I'm eligible for my gratuity." So no, and the guys in South Africa were very flexible too. And so I was like, "Look, do what you have to do, and then the job is yours." So as soon as you're ready, you come through. So we were planned out. We were supposed to move schools and all that was planned. And then accident happened. So then we're like, we're not going. So
right.
then we're like, okay, maybe recover it. He went through rehab. It took 8 months for him to actually. He was in hospital for 8 months.
Oh,
And yeah, so in that 8 months, he had multiple surgeries, and just so that they could get him into a situation whereby at least he could sit, and he
yeah,
had partial mobility of his hands.
yeah,
So with the aid of with a mechanical aid, he could also
yeah.
hold a cup, could hold a pen, but it took a lot of time
Right.
and physiotherapy for him to actually it took like years just for
Just
him
to
to
get to that
actually
point.
just to get to that point.
So I'm sure it
Mhm.
was very hard for you guys, but I mean, I couldn't imagine how tough this was for him, obviously. I mean, especially very athletic, ambitious, industrious, and then to be kind of like, wheelchair bound. How did
Yeah,
you
I
think
mean,
that took this?
it was very hard. It was extremely hard. And my dad, like, he was never a guy to
Mhm.
complain, but like you could see it broke him. It really did. And
Yeah,
to add to that, the fact that this is a guy who was, I mean, like, before the accident, obviously he was loved, and at least,
yeah,
everybody recognized him. But after the accident, obviously, as 8 months in South Africa, rehab and in the hospital, then you come back home, a month, 2 months, people still coming and whatever, a lot of friends, what. But then after that, then everybody disappears, you
right.
know.
So there was a lot of
You
life
know.
lessons now learned between
Exactly.
you, the
Yeah, so
top of this world, everybody's at
yeah.
its feet, and now to be found
Yes.
in this situation, and now you start seeing who's really who.
Exactly. So now when he came back to Zambia, like obviously the 2 months because he's just come back into the country,
Yeah,
right? So still that keeping up appearances. But
yeah,
after that, then reality begins to set in. So there was a lot of lessons for dad as well, and also for us. So you really now begin to see, okay, who was really real, who was actually there for the show,
for the
you know.
name and the connection.
Exactly. So, like, there's less than one handful of people were there for him, in the 18 years that he was in
Yeah,
his wheelchair. Less than a handful. In fact, I wouldn't like to start dropping names here, but
right.
I
I know
only
exactly what you meant.
three guys who can say were really there for him the
Yeah,
18 years in the wheelchair.
which is a shame. Now, this is, I think I may have mentioned this to you before, but have you guys ever thought about doing like a documentary for your dad?
It's definitely something which we have thought about this, and
Philip,
it's
this is where I
definitely
come
something.
in because I think that, and this is kind of how I did some stuff around that stuff, because I think that first of all, your dad's name within Chingola, but also his name in the Zambian soccer history and his impact on it. But it goes beyond that, because you guys and your kids now and the things that they're doing, I think that level of history is worth archiving and putting in the record books for so many people. There's just so many people that would take so much out of learning, knowing your dad's story. It's definitely worth pursuing. Definitely.
Definitely, and especially because it's something I'm really seriously thinking, and especially how his life unfolded, especially
Yes.
the two chapters, because there's such a juxtaposition of the two chapters of his life.
Yes.
In Act 1, you see the
Right.
superstar. In Act 2, this superstar is completely subdued. And now, like, my mom had to come to the fore now. My mom, who was literally retired, had to start taking care of us. When Dad had an accident, I was in grade 10.
Right.
And I was the eldest. So now you can imagine how young the other guys were. We had to mature very quickly.
Keep it up, yeah.
For the 18 years, Dad he basically needed like a nurse.
Right.
For the 18 years but like we couldn't afford that,
Right.
We couldn't afford. So everybody had to chip in, had to learn how to help take care of Dad. And this was probably the most heartbreaking thing for Dad. This is a man who was always the provider. And now he can't provide. He has to be provided. Right? So that was really, really heartbreaking. Like any woman, I have so much respect for my mom. I will walk to the ends of the earth and back for my mother. There's nothing I can't do for my mother. Even if it wasn't for the accident or whatever, it would be the same. But there's absolutely nothing I can't do for my mother, because I saw what she did for my father in the 18 years he was in a wheelchair. I don't know how many women could have managed, because that was a tough and a real job, And imagine taking care of Dad. She had to put aside all her, and she was. She was in her early 30s, so she was still a young woman. She was still in her prime. She had to give up any ambitions of doing anything, so she had to take care of kids, and she had to take care of her husband. Sorry.
Yeah. But this is, it's stuff like that is very heartbreaking. But now for me, like I look back and in retrospect, and you have to proactively think about these things. I think about this now, right? The stuff that you had to go through, and you think about your mother, for instance, just first of all, and you said it right there, your appreciation and the things you would do for your mother, because she went, that's above and beyond. That's kind of stepping it right up. And it wasn't just for your dad, but for everybody else. But this is, and especially, we share the faith foundation and the faith background. I think this is where it comes in now. Because, you go through it's very exciting in the beginning, and then it's almost kind of like a sad story to end. But it's interesting because I had an interview with somebody, and I was talking about how we look about the Zambia national team. When the Zambia national team died in Gabon, and how sad that was. It was a global thing that just affected everybody. I think, I don't know how many years later, but in 2011, I want to say, Zambia goes back to the Africa Cup of Nations in Gabon, and they win. Yeah. And they went, Zambia would have, if the Zambia national soccer team would probably not have been in the top, I don't know how many teams go to the Africa Cup, 16, I don't know. Yeah. But Zambia would not have been in the top half of the favorites. But for them to have put off and to win the Africa Cup of Nations was something, it was an act of God, in my view. I think the same way about your dad. I think the same way about for what happened to your dad, for how much he gave himself to the community, to the country, for what your family has done. Now you've got nephews now that are on the cusp of, being recognized in their respective fields. Your son's playing golf, your other nephew's playing soccer. Tell me how much joy this is bringing into you guys to see that the legacy of your dad is leaving through your sons and, your nephews and nieces.
Two things here. The first thing, right? When initially the news broke to me that Dad was in an accident, and the weeks that followed, it was very traumatic for everybody, and trying to come to terms with doctors saying that he will never walk again. It was very heartbreaking. That was one. But in April of the same year, that was the same year that the Zambia national team died in that plane crash.
Was it the same in 92?
It was the same year. And Interestingly enough, Dad was supposed to be on the coaching panel for that trip. The only reason he didn't go was the fact that he was in hospital. We still have the letter at home for the official call-up from the Football Association of Zambia calling my father to be the to be the coach for the national
Right.
team.
So you have been traveling to Gabon for the qualifier that ended up the plane that ended up crashing.
So in hindsight,
I didn't know.
We are all truly grateful for the accident. 18 years with dad, albeit in a wheelchair, but those 18 years of dad in a wheelchair, I have such great memories and such great interactions with my father in those 18 years. I learned so much from him. I'm truly grateful for those 18 years that I spent with him, because otherwise he would have been in you
wouldn't even have had that.
No,
man,
wouldn't have. So that's one.
Hey, and this is what I'm saying. We gotta get on that documentary, William. Come on, Joe. I didn't know that.
Oh, and then what is it you're asking? What is it like to be, having this father who was, this type or whatever? It was like, for me growing up, it was for my brother a little bit as well. It was really hard, because the expectation was, everybody you see, was like, are you gonna play soccer? Are you gonna be like your father? No, that man, I can never walk a millimeter in that man's shoes. Right. He set the bar way too high, So, and like my father, he never really got the financial reward from the soccer, so he kind of pushed me more into the academic route. I love soccer. I'll play day in day out, but he pushed me more into the academic route. But everybody else was like, when are you going to play football? When are you going to? And I listened to that all the time growing up, because the people's expectations was, man, your father was great. I'm sure there's greatness somewhere in you.
There's a gene in there. There's a gene in there somewhere.
And the same thing for my brother as well. My brother played soccer in the US.
He had a scholarship, right?
Got a soccer scholarship, and he played college football, college soccer,
Yeah.
But that was probably the mistake. If you had gone to Europe, it would have probably been a different different thing. The time he was in college, and soccer is not very big in the US.
And back then, I mean, this is like, it's kind of coming up.
Yeah. Now it's kind of different, So the thing is, now that we have our own kids, my brother's got his own. He's got his own son, who is a phenomenal goalkeeper.
And it's been looked at by the national squad, right?
He's being scouted by the under-16 national team, the American national team.
See how God is making it work out for you guys.
Exactly. And I keep toying with. I keep conversating with my brothers. It may have skipped a generation, but that really blood.
Yeah,
it's still there. It's still flowing strong in these things. I mean, same thing. Like, you look at my son as well. Like, I keep telling him, look, you come from a bloodline of success. Because even my dad's younger brother, he played basketball. He played basketball for the national team as well. He was also brilliant in his own right. So that's another very interesting story for another different day. It's not surprising. So that's why I keep telling my son, because even Michelle's kids are very athletic as well. It's like, look, that period definitely it skipped us, but hey, it's all good.
It's gonna come out somewhere.
Yeah, it has to come out somewhere.
So when you look back and you put all these things together now, what perspective do you get? Because I think I want to get back into talking more about now the dynamics of life as it happens, right? And so many times you can have so many plans. You have all these ambitious, industrious plans, and something that happens that's outside of your control, which has to change everything about you, your perspective. You lived this. You lived this experience of being in the excitement of a famous dad, renowned.
Yeah.
And then life-changing right before your eyes. When you look back to what you guys have had to endure and things like that, what perspective do you have for life? I want to say, I'm looking for something like, what do you value? What's most important to you now, knowing what you know?
Knowing what I know, I think the most important thing is, I think family really is at the core of everything, Family, and having real, you need to identify real friends. You need to identify real friends, and you need to, family is really, really at the core, because a lot of things fade away. A lot of things, family is always going to be there. And if you have real friends, they'll really get you through.
Yes.
But the perspective I've really gotten through this life's experience right now is really resilience,
Yes.
My wife always asks me, how do you keep going,
Yes.
So, because I've had setbacks upon setbacks upon setbacks. I just keep going, I always say there's another gear somewhere, and
Yes.
I was fine. I mentioned this to you before. Like 2024 was a very tough year.
Yes.
So I was in the C-suite of
Yes.
a pharmaceutical company, and I was doing extremely well.
Yes.
Extremely well. But things happened, and I had to relinquish my position as a chief operating officer in a startup. So and that really just like I literally told my wife. And this is like indicative of how my father was. Because I told my
Yes.
wife, look, work, I have us covered.
Yes.
I could take care of. So,
Yes.
but like,
Yes.
yeah, but as life would have it, right?
Yeah.
Things didn't work out the way I thought they would because
Yes.
everything, like the trajectory of where I was going with my career.
Yes.
At the beginning of 2024, it was really all good plain sailing. We were doing extremely well.
Yes.
And then just things happened, I had to leave my position
Yes.
as COO. And like
Yes.
now, because everything happened so fast that it was almost like now what we do, it had to
Right.
like reset,
Reset. Right.
completely reset, and it's different when you're planning for it. Because
Yes.
obviously you would reset over a given period of
You
time.
kind of plot your moves. You know where to go from if something doesn't fail, right? Yeah.
Exactly, but it didn't happen like that. It
Yeah.
happened. It progressed over a very, very short period of time, and we had to mutually agree to separate, which we
Yeah.
did. So now, what do I do?
Right.
So then on my, I was like, you know what? I'll find another job.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's no big. So, but then but life is very,
So
very,
many
life is very.
curveballs. So let me ask you this then. When I was coming up with this podcast, right? I wanted to think about my own life and really narrow it down to one word that defines what I think is my resolve for life. What is it about the people that I've grown to admire, and I've been very privileged to know prominent people, build relationships with some of them, and in my conversations with them, what is it about them? What makes people successful? And the people that get successful, what is it that they can look back and say, maybe just give me one word about a definition? How would you define your life? And I think that for me, what stood out the most, what to define my life and the people that I admire the most was relentless. So I called this podcast Relentless because that's what it took. And we talk about this all the time. We've had so many conversations. I was just having another podcast with somebody. It's never a straight line. It's never a straight line to the top. Sometimes you're gonna have to take a gap year that you didn't plan for, like to care for people, like all of these things. But ultimately, it's when you get to the end of the journey and you look back and you see that through all of these things, especially for people like me and you, sharing that, it's kind of like God had you covered. God was always on your side. But it's also to understand that those steps were very necessary for you to get to where you got, because you would have never got to where you ended up getting if it wasn't for the experiences and the detours you had to take. So that's essentially what you're saying. It's kind of that. But when me and you talk, we can think this is kind of like what's everywhere. But me and you, beyond these circles, is that there's people that have never experienced some of these things, and it's kind of trying to sometimes relate to people like that is not the easiest thing, because you just think that's exactly how life is supposed to be. So in short here, when you think of relentless, what does it mean to you? Relentless.
Like relentless, like I'm saying, like for me, resilience,
Yeah.
like you just have to keep going. There's no quick, so because I know that, and I think for me, like really what drives me is the fact I need to keep learning and I need to keep going. I need to keep moving.
Yes.
That's what keeps me. So I've taken up another master's program. So I'm doing another master's program. I've already got another master's program, another whatever. So I've taken on.
This is your second master.
Yeah, this is my second master's, which I'm doing. So I intend to finish it early. So
that's relentless.
I should be done by November. That's
right.
The target.
That's good.
And that's just me. And I've seen this, and this is because I've seen what life can do. And if my mother wasn't relentless, if she didn't have the resilience to keep going, I wouldn't be where So my life has been that blueprint of being relentless and having that resilience to keep going has been molded into me by the experiences my father has had and my mother has gone through as well, and you can see that, look, life can be really all rosy, and then it can break your heart. It can be rosy because, when we got to by the time my dad was coming to the end of his, to the end of his life, he was at a place where I can say, his faith was strong, because the first 5 years of his life in a wheelchair, they were the hardest,
I can only
because
imagine.
it was coming to terms with the fact that you will never walk again. What does your life look like? What am I going to do? So it was really, really tough. He was very much a recluse at that time. Like, he never really let anybody in. After that 5 years, okay, fine. No, so now kind of shield was coming down, and his started to grow. He was, so his faith, he got, he was really, really strong. He became a very strong Christian. And I think that's why my faith as well kind of grew. It kind of grew with as well,
Yeah.
So by the time, it was coming, he was like my dad. I can say, he died a happy man, knowing he had
that's special.
He had achieved certain things, he had seen his kids grow. He had seen his kids start to have children, so, and I think, like, for any parent, you want to see your kids doing well, and you want to see that kids are going to be fine. And I think when my father was dying, I think he had reached a point where he could see that, okay, these guys are going to be fine.
Funny you say that. Did I tell you how my dad died?
Uh-huh.
It's funny, and I'm not surprised. So I was, my book had just come out, and we had this the fantastic phone conversation, and I received a call about a major deal that we were about to sign with my book, worth a lot of money, and it was just in its infancy. And eventually it got approved, and we were signing this deal. I told my dad about this because we were planning a book launch for my book, Raised by the World, in Zambia. And I say to my dad, I said, when's the last time you stayed in a hotel? And, he's like, Mona, what do you think I am? Like, Analika pa YMCA. I'm not pa YMCA. Let's go to Radisson. So this is literally parts of December 2000. And I booked a hotel stay for my dad at Radisson. And I had his best friend, Dr. Mumba, was coming with him. And, we were having this conversation. And I think it was December 7th when I get all these approvals and we were signing a major deal. And I talked to my dad. It was the longest conversation I remember having with my dad. It was like a 3-hour conversation talking about, where life had taken me, a lot of things. Because a lot of the things, my emotions, my dad didn't really understand my emotions until he read my book. He didn't understand what I was going through, seeing him through all the things he was going through, because he didn't even realize I was noticing them. But I had a conversation with him on a Monday for 3 hours. I know for a fact this was the happiest I had ever felt my dad was. And I also knew that there was something that happened, something I can't explain, but it was something out of this world that I felt was a connection between me and my dad on that Monday. And my dad technically died in his sleep on Wednesday.
Wow, that's powerful.
And when you say that, you remind me of what happened to him, because it's, I think now I can relate to being a dad. And, when you see your child do something special, when you go to like camps and your daughter is kind of like presenting something, and the joy and the pride that it gives you. But I think that my dad, knowing that, obviously he's proud of all of his kids, but my relationship with him being that special and knowing that something substantial had come out of that, I think gave him so much peace and so much joy and gratitude for life that he was fulfilled. If there's any thought of fulfillment and completion to where it's like, I have run my race and this is it, now I can go and rest in peace, that to me, that's what my conversation with my dad was. And when my dad passed, I was not surprised the least bit. I don't think I shed a tear through my dad's entire funeral, because to me that was a celebration, and I felt like, everything that could have been said was said in that conversation on Monday, which was such a joy and such a, like I'm writing my second book. And I've shared some of those things about my dad's last few months and last few days. And I look back now, it's special. Nothing can top that. And I say that because you mentioned about your dad, how hard it was from, the first part of him after being in an accident. And now you go back towards the end of his life and how much he was able to kind of come to himself and get so much perspective. My favorite people right now to talk to are people that are very, very old, or people that have like a physical ailment or things like that, because I think that those people will give you the most sober perspective for life. One of my friends is Rags. Rags is 97 years old, and I talk to him very, very often. And I just want to pick their minds. I want to ask you, what were some of your most memorable conversations with your dad towards the end of his life? because he had come to terms with his situation. You know, he's wheelchair bound, and he obviously had the support of your mother, especially, who I think in this entire story also deserves a lot of praise. I couldn't imagine. And I think this is the story that we get all the time, right? When you see somebody like your dad go through that because your dad had the name, everybody will always just be thinking about your dad. But you forget about the one person that was right by his side, making sure that he was functional at least, or she was making sure that, you know, he kept going. What do you think was your dad's perspective towards the end of his life?
I think his perspective really was that, staying true to oneself is always going to be, you need that sense of honesty with yourself and your own ability, because especially it's worse now because you're trying to play to the gallery. Always concerned about what will people think and things like that, and you end up sacrificing your own happiness and your own self trying to please other people, But I think like for him, this is something he was always trying to inculcate. Like, just stay true to yourself and, put yourself and make sure that, do right by yourself all the time. Do right by yourself and do right by your family. Because I remember when we were having Jaden, I thought I wasn't ready to have it, at the time Jaden was along, and I was really, it scared me. And, so I picked up the phone and I called him, and he had a calming and reassuring way of just, having, so that's one of the conversations that really sticks around with me. And we talked, just look, things happen and you don't feel like you're ready, but trust me, you are. I know the person I raised. I know the man I raised, and I know that you are well and capable, coming to the task, But you really have to make sure that you raise this kid right.
Right. Because you saw it firsthand.
If there's anything you have to do, you have to make sure that you raise this boy right.
Yeah.
It was, you always had this reassuring, you always had this way of trying to reassure you that, look, it's going to be fine,
Yeah.
And he's the one who named Jaden. Jaden's other name is Wezi, which in our language is gift.
Right.
He was like, forget, everything you have is a gift,
Right.
So,
that's so special. Who do you think is most like your dad in your family now, between you and your siblings?
I think that man had a way of actually just
he split himself equally,
but like I kind of have to give a bit more credit to my brother, because my brother has, I see, because I can't see, I can stand in the mirror and I can't really see myself, but I can see my others, so if I'm gonna, because I think, my brother has developed this aura about him, which is just so indicative of how dad was, he's
special.
I mean, the level of he's cultivating a sense of wisdom and which because my dad used to, I don't know how he always used to find himself, at the center of disputes and
resolving things.
So, and he always used to complain, but in the end, he came to terms with that, because then he realized that this was actually a gift. My father was always like, he just had a way of, because he was very impartial. My father, if you're wrong, you're wrong.
Yeah.
He just, that you're my son and this. No, if you're wrong, you're wrong. And to you as it is, and I think that's what people appreciated about him, because there was no beating about the bush. If he doesn't like it, he'll tell you.
Yeah.
And he had this way of they just had this way of going about his business, especially when with other people, knowing that, okay, this man, forget it is with him, it's black or white.
Right.
There's no gray. Sometimes I suffer from the grays. You kind of want to be almost like, don't want to ruffle.
You're good guy. You want to make everybody happy.
Exactly. But my dad, it's black or it's white.
Sounds like my dad.
And my brother and my brother's a lot is a lot more like that. My brother is just this chap.
That's special. That's special. What do you think now that you guys with your kids obviously getting active? I know your daughter's playing is into boxing, right?
Boxing, yeah.
Boxing, and your son's playing golf. Your nieces and nephews. What sports are you guys as kids involved in?
Sorry, what?
What sports are your kids, like between you and your siblings? What they involved in?
So like, well, Jaden obviously plays the golf, and he's working. He's working hard at it. So we're hoping this summer. I mean, the target for this summer is trying to get to single-digit handicap by the end of this year.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, it's doable. I mean, it's within reach. So it's doable. It's doable. Then but he's also an active basketball player. He loves basketball. That basketball gene is strong. It's like
Yeah.
never introduced to basketball or anything like that. Somehow he just gravitated towards it. And he plays for the school team and he's pretty good at it as well. And then Sinead. Then my daughter, she's a bit of an all-rounder as well. She is, probably she takes it a little bit from the brother as well, but she is highly competitive.
Yeah.
She's very, very competitive. She does not like to lose. She's a sore loser, so she needs to lose,
Hey, I don't blame her.
Because like we were saying, life is not linear, but yeah, she's into her boxing. She loves her boxing, loves her boxing, loves her piano. She started playing tennis now as well. So
okay.
I love tennis. But yeah, I think go with boxing. I don't know. This was something like her mom got her into it. And I told her, look, what's going to happen if she enjoys it?
Yes.
What's going to happen if she wants to participate in tournaments? Are you going to stomach watching it?
Yes.
So she was, no, maybe she won't. Yeah, but now look. There she is, so she's loving it. So I don't see her quitting anytime soon.
That's very good. So also you guys are now keeping your dad's memory alive through his foundation. You guys set up the Willy Phiri Foundation. Yes. How's that going?
It's like anything that's done remotely, it has its challenges.
Yes.
So I mean we kicked it off and we've been pushing it, but I think we want to push more now, especially this year, trying to revive it because we were really sponsoring.
Are you guys targeting any specific subjects? What are you guys trying to do with it?
So we have actually 2 kids in college right now at the University of Zambia. So at the corporate university, sorry. So our idea was to help the youth. So when the Willy Phiri Foundation was set up, we had a small youth team, just teenagers. Huh? So we were supporting that initiative. So out of that first cohort, there was two boys who were talented soccer players, but not talented enough so that they would go. But they were also pretty. Because the thing is, right? You as a sports person, the statistics when it comes to making it highest level, very very marginal. These boys also showed discipline towards academia as well, so they did pretty well in their secondary school. This is what we're trying to do with the foundation. I mean, like. We could go probably 10, 15, 20 years at the foundation, and we might not even produce a single phenom. As long as we can help these kids, with, being better people in society, or help them get a trade or help them get an education, then we're changing their lives as well. Like we have a boy called Mumba and a boy called John. So these two now, one's doing chemical engineering and the other one is doing, he's trying to get into med school, I think.
Interesting. I think I knew that actually. I think I knew about that.
They're doing pretty well. And so that's the whole goal of the thing. Is like, we're trying to give opportunities to these guys so that at least, they can be set apart from, the other kids. Because, I mean, there's so many vices which are just, these kids can fall into. So, to carry on the legacy of our father, we thought, if we could actually, push towards, trying to get these kids and trying to give them opportunities that they would have probably never would have gotten in any other situation. Hopefully this year, my brother's car should be going down, I think in April or something like that, So he's gonna do a bit more groundwork on that as well. But yeah, it's work in progress, and so we're still pushing.
Good. It's more life skills. I mean, it's the same thing that I try to do with my foundation. It's obviously, I think that I've been fortunate in so many different ways, but I've looked back at my own life to see things that I wish somebody did to me, some things that I wish things had done for me. And I think beyond golf, beyond any sports, it was the life skills, because I think that if you can give kids the chance to understand some of these life skills, character, integrity, sportsmanship, and all of these values, they easily transfer to life general. And I think that's what's more important. So I think that it's very commendable what you guys are doing, and I think we share that with the things that we're doing with the foundation. It's I've never imagined myself being instrumental, or if it works out, great, that through the foundation somebody comes through and they want to play golf and pursue it to the professional ranks. But I think beyond that, it's the life skills. If I can see a kid that we had a chance to take a few kids through school and college, and they are now working and they have never had that chance. It's kind of adding to the number of responsible citizens that we can put into society. And I think it's a platform that extends the legacy of your dad. I do it in my dad's name. And it's, there's nothing more joyful than things like that. And that's so good. Good for you guys. Okay, we're going to get winding down here, William, but I want to get more into because I know your strength is your intellectual ability. What are some of your literature projects right now? Are you reading any books?
I'm always reading. So, like I said, look, I've started a master's program there. So I'm getting into data analytics, because my job. So that's taking up I'm reading a lot of academic. Reading a lot of academic stuff. But one thing that I'm rereading is Dr. Vincent Norman Peale, The Power of the Mind.
Really? Nice. I read that book. Yeah.
I've read it before, but I'm kind of rereading. It's one of my favorite books, so I'm kind of rereading it again, So,
okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's I'm always reading, So
I'm always reading a few different books. I want to show you the books I'm reading. I'm reading like 4 books at the same time. Here's one of them, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Have you read this one?
Yes, I have.
And this one, I just got to find about this one very recently. This is Holy Spirit, my senior partner, David Yangich, pastor, largest church in the world. And I've been reading, do you know about the 700 Club? Pat Robertson?
Yes.
Reading his book, I Have Walked with the Living God. I love the perspective of especially people that have walked the path that I'm trying to walk. So good for you. Very good. Yeah. Okay, there you go. The Power of Positive Thinking. I read that book. What was the other one he wrote? I had a very tiny one. I have it somewhere, like a very tiny book. Maybe that's the one. Maybe I have a tiny version of that same one.
Another interesting book, which I've just actually finished reading, is this one, Curtis Jackson.
Tell me about this book. Is it good?
It's actually it's pretty good, actually.
Who did he write that with?
Sorry?
Who did he write that with? I read the 50th Law with was it Robert Greene he wrote that with?
No, well, this one I'm not sure he's wrote it with, but I think Mark Siegel or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very interesting take on his life, his thought process. Like, when you look at, say, 50 Cent rap, but the business mogul
is different. Yes.
And then but when you read this book, he's a very different. This guy puts on a huge persona, and that kind of works for him, So
I think I may have sent you this clip. I consider myself a student of life, right? And I've followed 50 Cent. I probably don't listen to his music now, but I look at some of his interviews. He's highly intellectual. He knows what he's talking about. I have a lot of respect for him. I think I sent you a clip of Mike Tyson, and Tyson was saying some really impressive stuff. It's funny that I like that because these guys that have seemingly had a career in one field, you know them as musicians, like a Jay-Z, you know them as, rappers, musicians, but they've seemingly had a transition into business and how they've excelled. That's not just any chance or luck. These guys know their stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's why a friend of mine recommended that book to me, and it's a very interesting read. It's like
I should look into that.
The thought process of because like these guys they're putting on a show, and it's all business.
It's part of branding.
It's all branding, and they're making money,
Yes.
And then you read, and this is what I keep telling my son as well. You have to be very careful how you perceive certain things and certain information that you get. You're watching TV. Whoever you're watching is getting paid. You're not being paid.
Right. Yeah. William, this has been fun. I've really, really enjoyed our conversations. Thank you for sharing these amazing memories of your wonderful dad. We surely honor his memory, and hopefully you guys make something out of his story. He lived an incredible life and left a lasting impact, and it's just amazing to see. I couldn't thank you enough for joining me today, my friend.
All right, no, the pleasure was always mine. It's always a pleasure to to conversate with you. Always a pleasure.
I will catch up with you very soon.
Yeah, best of luck in Japan and everything else.
Absolutely, thank you. Give my best to your family. Bye.
Bye.